I think you've all heard about this, and you've all heard about that. So, in today's video, we are going to discuss what is that and how we can control it, or how we can profit from it. Please, let's hop into it. In 1944, the country was coming from World War II, and all countries were affected by the war. America had the biggest gold reserves and was doing well in the economy. So all countries agreed to use the dollar as their medium of exchange, because at that time all the money was backed up by the gold standard. So the Americans had a very big economy. They had succeeded in the war, but things changed in 1971 in the Richard Nickson administration, when the president Richard Nickson removed the dollar from the gold standard. So it became fiat money. It became money with no gold backing. What do I mean by the gold standard? By then, every money that you produced was backed up by the amount of gold reserves that you have. But now, Richard Nickson removing them from the gold standard, it means that you can produce the amount of money that you want and you feel like. Well, what led to this recession that we're having? And most of the time, it's the coronavirus that we had in 2020. When we had a pandemic, the whole country or the whole of Africa went into under lockdown. So businesses were not working. So we are not creating income. In fact, there was no production. Also production from factories slowed down because there was little consumption of goods and services. People were home. And another thing was unemployment. Some factory workers were laid off. For example, in Congo, most of the factory workers were laid off. Over 1,000, those ones who worked in mines. And in Zambia, over 800 of them were laid off from the copper belt. We found ourselves, all our hands were tied. So in fact, it's not a problem of the government. We have no control over this. So it reached the time that we have no solution that we could do. So that's why the government opted for stimulus checks, which in fact was also a problem, because stimulus checks led to inflation. The 100,000 that we are getting as Ugandans also led to inflation. So Africa was affected, and the whole world was affected. In fact, this recession is becoming even more and more and more and more and more worse. It will become more and more worse. This is just the beginning. So we should pray hard that we don't go into a recession, because the economy of the world was shut down. China acts as a middleman, because Africa produces raw materials. It gives to China. China produces goods which are sold in Europe or America. But there was slow consumption. So if in fact there was slow consumption of goods and services. Now, when there is slow consumption of goods and services in Europe and America, Africa would not benefit, because there is slow production or slow sending of raw materials. That one has affected so much Africa, and that's why we are here. In fact, China is still under a lockdown, economic slump. The dollar was already inflated. It had a very big inflation. As I told you about the 1944 agreement, America exported its inflation into African countries. So we are already inflated with the American dollars. That also led to an inflation we are having. The other things you can say, we have a poor transported system, but also the war between Russia and Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine supply 40% of wheat to Africa, to mostly East African countries and West African countries. So the war between those two countries has cut off that percentage. So the food prices are going high. Russia supplies almost 40% of its oil to Europe. So they have higher prices of energy, of gas, of energy, of petrol, of diesel, what. We are also being affected as Ugandans. A recession. Nowadays, we are facing what we call a recession, whereby we have high fuel prices and high food prices. Almost everything is doubling to the original price that it was there. But this one has been caused by so many factors. But one might ask, what is a recession? A recession is a decline in the economic activity. What do I mean by this? Previously, there was fast production of commodities and fast selling of commodities, or fast consumption of commodities. But it changed to a slow production of goods, to a slow consumption of goods, because of high prices and because of unemployment, basically. How is a recession measured? A recession is measured by the GDP. What is a GDP? The coffee you take also contributes to a GDP. The haircut that you get also contributes to GDP. The car you buy also contributes to the GDP. So the GDP is the gross domestic product, which means it's the amount of goods and services that are produced into the economy. Today, when you move out of your house, you realize that there are high fuel prices and the food prices are also high. In fact, food and energy are rising in price. Let me take you back to 2020. 2020, we had a pandemic of coronavirus whereby our country was under a lockdown, or as Africa, we were all under a lockdown, whereby there was slow manufacturing of goods but high consumption rates, which led to prices going to the roof. So amidst that, most of the African countries gave what we call stimulus checks to its citizens. This led into an inflation. We found ourselves under an inflation, and an inflation leads to a recession. That is why you see big high prices of fuel. Under coronavirus, we had a problem of tourism, whereby tourists were no longer coming to the country, mostly in African countries, because our GDP solely depends on tourism, it depends on donations, so we are not receiving donations anymore. So that one led into a decline of our economy, and some projects were suspended because of coronavirus. The building of roads, building of factories, other financial aids were cancelled. That one led into a recession that we're having today. What caused the recession? Why do we have the recession? First of all, it's coronavirus. So in 2022, we had coronavirus, which affected our economy. We were under a lockdown. There was no production of goods. In fact, there was slow production of goods by factories, and there was no income from small businesses. That led into high prices because of the slow production of goods by the factories. Now, next point, the war between Russia and Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine supply mostly 40% of their wheat to East African countries and West African countries. The inflation of the dollars that we get. In 1944, we all agreed to use the dollar as a medium of exchange. In 1971, Richard Nickson, under the Richard Nickson administration, got the dollar from the gold standard to a fiat currency that we are having now, which is not backed up by gold. So it means America can produce the number of dollars that it wants. America gave out stimulus checks to its citizens, which means it produced more money into the economy. So it exported the inflation to African countries. So that's why we are having this problem today of a recession. The next point is unemployment. Most factory workers were laid off by factories because of the pandemic. The factories could not support them because they were doing low production. How can you profit from a recession? First is to save money. Have cash. Cash is king right now, because you tend to buy goods and services at a cheaper price, because people will tend to dispose of the cars that they have, dispose of the land they have. You'll tend to buy them cheaply. Second, invest in real estate, things that bring money into your pockets, because at the end of the day, real estate will again go back to the roof. The economy will stabilize. So this is whereby the rich become more richer and the poor become more poor. We shall see the gap of the rich and the poor. Third, attain more skills. Have a new skill that you're learning that will make you to be an essential person. Fourth, invest more in agriculture, because Africa, we are good in agriculture. So the more you invest more into agriculture, remember I told you food prices are going high. You're going to benefit from this. Invest more in metals or in commodities. Right now you can buy them cheaply, because now, for example, copper was at around 15,000 in Ugandan money, UG shillings. Now it is around it is 10,000. So 5,000 has dropped, almost 5,000. Copper scrap has dropped. So buy scrap. The way we call what we call scrap. So that's tin, copper, that's tin, aluminium. They are all from there. Invest in livestock. Now is the appropriate time to invest in livestock, because you're dealing with real money. Join businesses like timber. It is the best way you can keep your money. Buy those things, because the economy will stabilize. What moves up will always move down, and what moves down will always move up. Please subscribe and hit the notification button. Stay put for the next video.